My name is Ginny, also known as Two-Thirds Lotus, everywhere on the internet. This clip is part of my series, The Poets of Twitch, where I analyze my viewers' writing live on stream. Nothing has been edited out, so you're seeing this exactly as streamed with all of the imperfections and tangents that come with being live. If you want to catch me live or want more information, check out the description. Otherwise, enjoy some excellent writing. So, Shooter Daniel. Does this poem have a title? And also, I have a few things. Good, thank you. That is good to hear. So one, it's called Last Night. Okay. Last Night. And then I have a YouTube series for all of these analyses that I do on stream called The Poets of Twitch. Are you okay with this being in that YouTube playlist when I post the VOD so that other people can also learn from it? If not, that is fine. Sure. Okay. And if you do change your mind, that's totally cool too. And I'm going to analyze it, possibly critique. Are you okay with critique? If not, I will refrain from doing too many suggestions or giving my... Okay. And it's not like I'm going to tell you, like, this is good or this is bad. It's going to be like, maybe we can do something different right here and move this line elsewhere and that kind of stuff. So, the way things go. Read the poem over a couple times, 2 or 3 times, just for enjoyment. I recommend this to anyone reading something, if they're trying to analyze it, or something for class, let's say, because the best part of poetry is that we get to read it and enjoy it, and then it's pretty, right? And emotional. And try to feel the poem, feel it out, right? The darkness beckons forward into more dark. Eyes stare into the void and see the reflection of what is. Pacing around endlessly in the void-filled park, it doesn't matter. After all, there is no hope in this all. A tingle, a connection, a thread stringing out in front, I can see it, the nurturing life waters brandished in bottle form. A feeling of wrongness. Should I take more or shunt? Worries washed away as the liquid pours down my throat. The darkness beckons forward into more dark. I am alone, no superiors, equals, or inferiors. Sip. I hold the container in my hand. Sorry. I hold the container in my hand to desperately mark. The choir of the damned calls out to me. Sip. A voice, distant and far, years and miles away, reaching through the space to grace me. Sip. How kind we talk despite the futility today. She ruins my comforts and perceptions. Sip. Why? Oh, how I begged for community and purpose, how cruel they keep running farther and farther away. Sip. The voice tells me to just embrace the absurd, how cool, I know better, I know better, I know better. Sip. The wells of knowledge and happiness are empty, machining. There's nothing left in the bottle. Another mirror. Wanting to be filled by some greater meaning. Things feel uneasy. The void spins greatly. My insides come pouring out. My ego shrinks against the wall. Tears stream purposelessly. Stop moving this. Go away. Okay. No, it's still moving. I struggle. Okay. I hate you. I hate you so much. I am left in a puddle of wallow, crying out into more dark beckoned. a pain, a grudge I can never swallow. That's heavy. This will be a fun one. I need to blow my nose. Thank you for the blessing. I feel blessed. Okay. So, that was the piano. Last Night by Shooter Daniel. Quite the poem. And it'll be quite an enjoyable one to look at. It's very, I would say, in many cases, thematically straightforward, but I'm just gonna read it again before using big words and colors and the pen. The darkness beckons forward into more dark. Sorry. The darkness beckons forward into more dark. Eyes stare into the void and see the reflection of what is, pacing around endlessly in the void-filled park. It doesn't matter. After all, there is no hope in this all. A tingle, a connection, a thread stringing out in front. I can see it, the nurturing life waters brandished in bottle form. A feeling of wrongness. Should I take more or shunt? Worries washed away as the liquid pours down my throat. The darkness beckons forward into more dark. I am alone, no superiors, equals, or inferiors. Sip. I hold the container in my hand to desperately mark. The choir of the damned calls out to me. Sip. A voice distant and far, years and miles away, reaching through the space to grace me. Sip. How kind we talk despite the futility. Today she ruins my comforts and perceptions. Sip. Why? Oh, how I begged for community and purpose. How cruel they keep running farther and farther away. Sip. The voice tells me just to embrace the absurd, tells me to just embrace the absurd. How cool. I know better. I know better. I know better. Sip. The wells of knowledge and happiness are empty, machining. There's nothing left in the bottle, another mirror wanting to be filled by some greater meaning. Things feel uneasy, the void spins greatly. My insides come pouring out. Ego shrinks against the wall. Tears stream purposelessly. I hate you. I hate you so much. I'm left in a puddle of wallow, crying out into more dark beckoned. A pain, a grudge I can never swallow. Okay. This poem's cool. So, I'm gonna go through and underline things that stick out to me that are cool. Darkness beckons forward into more dark. The darkness beckons forward into more dark. I think that repetition is interesting. You obviously have this theme throughout. Sip, 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 sip. Sip, sip. I'm just doing this because it's good to mark like the patterns and the things that are on the page, just so you can kind of be organized in your own analysis, right? A tingle, a connection, a thread stringing out in front. I really like this line. I can see it. The nurturing life, waters brandished in bottle form. It just sounds cool. Very brandished in bottle form, right? Sounds cool. Worries washed away as liquid pours. There's a connection down here. The embrace the absurd, how cool, and then like ego shrinking against the wall. That's very philosophical. Those words are very charged, absurd, and ego. Okay, where should I start? I'm gonna start here. I hate you so much. Blue is my color of questioning. And I think I put this here because I was thinking, well, who do I hate? Because there are lots of sort of characters in this poem. There is yourself, there is me, there is the narrator. There is also her. A voice distant and far, how kind she ruins my comforts, right? So there's she, and of course there's the drink. The substance. These are all things we could hate. And they're probably all the same in a sense. Hating oneself because of indulgence, hating the substance because what it does to the self, hating her because she comes in the substance, and etc., etc. But that's kind of a big question. It can be useful when you're doing analysis to just point at something and say, like, let's try to answer a question we have about the poem. I hate you. Let's ask, who do I hate? And it could be all of them. It could be none of them. There could be more options that I just haven't written down yet, right? So, the darkness beckons forward into more dark. Eyes stare into the void and see the reflection of what is. Pacing around endlessly in the void-filled park. Doesn't matter. After all, there is no hope in this all. A tingle, a connection, a thread stringing out in front. I can see it, the nurturing life waters, brandished in bottle form. A feeling of wrongness, should I take more or shunt, worries washed away as the liquid pours down my throat. So, throughout we have this theme of the tension of, like, should I not, right? A feeling of wrongness is that contradiction. Take more or shunt. And then I know better, I know better, I know better. Right? And then, like, a pain I can never swallow. Right? I think this line's also probably important in my interpretation. And I think a big theme here is helplessness. Is maybe what I get most, and I'll show why. A pain I can never swallow. That's often, like, never swallowing something. It's also like a truth you can't swallow. Something that you can't accept. Something that you can't change or won't change. A feeling of stuckness. Hello, Gin and Juice. Hello, Nico. How are you? And then we have this potentially just undirected hate. And in these moments of being able to do nothing, sometimes the answer is just to hate everything, right? Tears stream purposelessly, right? This tells me it doesn't matter how much suffering is gone through, no matter how many tears are shed, that isn't actually going to change what's happening. The wells of knowledge and happiness are empty. I think this connects as well. The wells of knowledge are empty. As to say, perhaps, if we're going with this theme, that no matter how much knowledge, potentially knowledge of happiness, knowledge of what I should be doing, there's nothing left inside the bottle, right? It's just gonna keep happening. It's helpless. Another mirror wanting to be filled by some greater meaning. I'll come back to that one. Why? Oh, how I begged for community and purpose, how cruel they keep running farther and farther away. Sip, the voice tells me to just embrace the absurd. How cool. I know better, I know better, I know better. Sip. Right. I think this stanza is really awesome. A voice distant and far, years and miles away, reaching through the space to grace me. Sip, how kind. Okay. I think I know what I want to talk about with this poem. And that is repetition. It obviously used in this poem very well. Usually takes me a little bit to find what I want to talk about, and I think we're going to talk about repetition and how to use it and how this poem uses it very, 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 very well, in my opinion. And can use it better in some places as well. And I think maybe we can try to make it work even better. Right? So you see repetition a lot in poetry. I use repetition in the poem I wrote at the start of Stream. Callbacks, using one word over and over. Poem title, How Are You? How are you doing today? Later I say, how are you not tasting this? And then later, how are you not hearing this? Later, how are you not fearing this? It's the bottom of last page. And how are we not sharing this? Right? Trying to complete my own challenge and failing. Are you still trying to write, you mean the confessional, like the one from forever ago that I also haven't finished? So, I signed up to compete in a slam on Halloween. That sounds super fun. She's just not ready. Yeah, I'm not doing any of the slams this month. I don't want to have to prepare all of that poetry for performance because I haven't performed on stage in like a month, so just not gonna do that. Anyway, I'd like to talk about repetition because there are a lot of ideas that are repeated. We have the idea of mirrors and the idea of darkness. You literally repeat this line, dark into more dark. The void, reflection, that's, mirror, right? And then of course, sip, 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 sip. Right? And I think these are some of the most powerful parts of the poem. And that's what repetition is good for. Adding power, adding weight. Because if you keep saying sip, I'm going to keep hearing it, and I'm going to realize that it's really important. Every time you say something, putting something in your poem indicates a level of importance to you. If I say sip once, then sip has some normal amount of importance compared to the rest of the words. But if I say sip 8 times in the poem, or 6 times, it indicates that I care about that word and that word matters. Because in poetry, something that at least I strive for is efficiency. Making sure every word is serving the purpose of the poem. And that means if you're repeating, then the word has to be repeated. It's that important, if it's efficient. Also, there's an ad break starting momentarily. Please, I implore you all, do not watch the ads. Stand up, drink some water, self-care, go to the bathroom, get a snack. Don't look at TikTok. Don't take a sip of whatever is ailing you. Just take a sip of some water. And yeah, then I'll be back. Or we'll be back in a minute, right? Just don't stare at the ad. It's not good for your brain. Nor your screen at all. Don't look at that either. I'm not doing anything. I'm just drinking water. Okay. Welcome back. Ads are over. You do not need to be commoditized for the next half hour. So we are returning to the poem. Analyzing the poetry of Chatter and a friend of mine, Shooter Daniel. And talking about repetition and why it matters in poetry. This is kind of what I've been doing with each of these analyses lately, is using them as a way to talk about different poetic strategies and teach. So we were talking yesterday about efficiency mostly with this poem. Before that, I think Darkness was talking about perspective and different ways things can be interpreted, right? So today we're going to talk about repetition, which I actually haven't talked about on stream before, so that's good, right? So, what I was saying before I got kind of cut off by the ad break, was that in poetry, we often care about efficiency. And that is, each word has a purpose. Each word is and probably should be saying something. That's my opinion. That's how I write poetry. So, let's take a word like sip. In the poem 6 times. Putting a word in once communicates an idea that I'm drinking something. Putting it again implies that, it's continuous or continued, and then the more times you do it, keep adding an amount of weight that can't be achieved just through using the word once. Now the question is, a question that you might ask is, when does this stop being efficient? Because you can think about this kind of as diminishing returns, right? Nice seeing you on stream. Gonna go work more on that poem. Yes, good to see you in chat. So, an idea that this makes me think about is diminishing returns. So, number of repetitions and impact. Probably the first repetition is going to have a lot of impact, probably the most, right? And you seem like a person with a lot of friends. How do I make them? Hi. I'll answer that question in a second. Because I do want to finish this graph. And I'm going to do actual numbers on this. This isn't always the case that these numbers are like what it looks like, but so the first repetition is going to have the most impact, in my opinion. If we don't say a word, then it can't have any impact, so the first one is going to be the most important, right? And I'm actually going to put it a little lower. So this is like 5 or 6 boxes up on my grid, right? And then the second one, seeing this word a second time does lend itself to like a lot of additional impact, because seeing a word once, you're like, okay, that word's important, it's in the poem, the writer cares about this. Seeing it a second time is like when the alarm bells should maybe start to be ringing, like, oh, they repeated this concept, they must care about it quite a bit, right? So, this one was like 6, and then this is like 4. Adds a good amount of additional impact. The numbers don't really mean anything. And then they do it again. And you're like, oh wow, that's a pattern. This must be a pretty important word, but that's not going to have the same impact as like the initial use of the word, in my opinion. And then the more you do it, it is going to keep reinforcing your ideas, but at a certain point, if you say a word too much, it's going to lose impact and then stop actually helping your poem. And this is the difficult thing of repetition, because this graph is not static. This could be 1, 2, 3, or depending on the word, it could be 1, 5, 10, 15 repetitions of a word in a poem. Depends on how long it is. It depends on what you're trying to say. Right? Additionally, a repetition isn't always clear. We have the word sip, but also if we mention drinking, if we mention tipping back the bottle, these are pseudo repetitions because they're reinforcing an idea. So we can repeat a word, we can also repeat a theme or a metaphor. And essentially, it's a matter of what amount should I do without reaching a point of too much diminishing return? That's the question, right? And we'll talk about that more. King Poyo, you ask, I seem like a person with a lot of friends. How do I make them? It's an interesting question, I suppose. How do I make friends? How do you make friends? I would say I kind of do have a lot of friends, right? I have met people on Twitch. I've met people in real life doing poetry. I've met people in different places I've lived, different communities. Like, I think that's a reasonable thing to say. And you ask, how do I make friends? And I think the most important thing to make friends is probably to do stuff. So, let me go down here. You ask, how do I make friends, right? And let's say you're in one community. Let's say you play a video game, Valorant, right? Valorant. And this has a pool of, we're just gonna make up numbers, 1,000 potential friends for you in your local community, at school, whatever, right? And you can make those friends. Some of these people just aren't gonna be your friends. Some of them you're not gonna vibe with. Some of them you will vibe with. It just depends. So, once this community is kind of expended, if you will, and there's always going to be new people are going to join, people are going to leave. But if we add another community, let's say you're a poet. Let's say you play Dungeons and Dragons. Let's say you're a musician. And you find communities based off of these things to put yourself into. You're going to increase your pool of people who might be your friend in each of them. And then it's a matter of like putting yourself in front of people, going to events, doing things. And the interesting thing is that I think this sort of spirals in a good way. The more communities you're in, the more things you're doing, is going to make you an interesting person. Some people will say, well, just like be interesting and, have things to say and things to talk about. Well, how do you do that? You just do that by doing things. I can guarantee if you have more hobbies and you do more things and are meeting more people, you're going to be more able to talk to those people, right? And it's like sort of a hard reality to say, like, do you want to make friends? Do stuff. Because some people are afflicted by an enemy known as time and cannot do a ton of things and have a ton of hobbies. Also, motivation. Also, maybe you have anxiety and it's difficult for you to be in these spheres and around lots of people and meet people, make friends. Or you are just kind of awkward and you aren't very good at talking. These are things that are all impediments to making friends, right? So then it's a matter of, well, how can I make friends anyway? What's taking up your time that you can't make friends? Is it work? Well, let's say you work in a place where you interact with people, with strangers. Turn that as a chance to meet people. Let's say you're a barista at a coffee shop and you talk to someone while they're like ordering their coffee, and then you have a similar hobby, and then they're a regular there, and then maybe you end up being friends, right? Or you just have friends who also work at your work. That's allowed. Work friends. Or if it's school, well, then that's going to be like your best place to make friends. You're around those people all the time, right? So if you have things like anxiety, I mean, there's lots of people who can give you better information on overcoming your anxiety to make friends than me, because this isn't a struggle that I have, right? And, similarly with being awkward and talking, but also, this can often be overcome by, just being a nerd. I used to be super awkward. I didn't talk to people. It's probably kind of hard to tell because I'm, this very articulate person on the internet who talks and seems like they have friends. But if you just do lots of things, I'm really into poetry. I'm really into D&D. And when I meet someone who also is, I am exceedingly capable of just, nerding out over the things I like. That's helpful. And let's say you don't have as much that's, interesting about you and you don't like talking that much. The good thing is, you don't always need to talk to make friends. You can listen. There are a lot of people like me who really like to nerd out over every single little thing they enjoy to do. And that's why I go on Twitch and do exactly that for the world, and people seem to like it. I mean, you're listening, right? So, if you're in conversation with someone, and you come upon a topic that they seem to enjoy, something that engages them, even if it's something they don't know about, just be interested. And it sounds dumb. You're like, well, what if I'm not interested? What if their hobby is, not interesting? Well, you're wrong. Their hobby is interesting. Make it interesting. There are so many hobbies and things and passions that people have that we discard because we're just not familiar with them. And I guarantee if you just listen to someone who's passionate about something, talk about the things they're passionate about, they can make that enjoyable to you. And it'll be enjoyable for them to talk about the things they like. And that can definitely just put a smile on their face. That will make them happy. To talk about the things that make them happy. And if you give people a space to do that, then they're probably going to like you. Granted, at some point you also want to have this be a person you can interact with and talk about the things you enjoy. You don't just want to be this person that they rant at about all their passions all the time. But I'd say that's a basic idea of how one might come to make friends. So I don't know if any of that is helpful, but that's probably roughly what I've experienced. Back to the poem. So, repetition and diminishing returns. So then the question we ask is, are the things we have repeated enough? Or are things repeated too much? That's the only question we really need to ask with repetition. If they're repeated too much, we take them out. If they're not repeated enough, we add more repetitions in for more impact. If we feel the returns are not still diminishing, we can keep adding things. Oh my gosh, we have a raid. Welcome. Who raided me? Whoa. Dechard Games raiding with 414? What? Welcome, everyone. Oh my gosh, very loud sounds. Thank you, everyone who is following. Oh my gosh. Welcome? I've never had this many people looking at my channel at one time, so I appreciate. Oh my gosh. So, since there are now many new people here, I got 2 raids? Okay. Wow. I can't keep up. We are here and queer for poetry. We're a nice bunch. Awesome. I'm super psyched about that. So, what I'm doing right now is actually reading some poetry, right? And I have a poem that has been submitted by one of my viewers, Shooter Daniel, and we are analyzing it and reading it and having a grand old time, right? And we're talking about how to use repetition in poetry. I tend to read over my viewers' poems and either give them specific critique or advice or analysis, and then also, of course, talk about broader themes in poetry and how we can improve and do better and sort of learn more about poetry, right? I write a lot of poetry, and if you want to find like the things that I write, you can go on like all my socials, TikTok, Instagram. Very cool, didn't know Twitch had this genre. We love poetry. Yeah, so Twitch has a fairly decent, robust community of writers. If you look, I'm streaming under writing and reading. It's like a brand new like category on Twitch though. So it is yeah, pretty new, but there's a good number of us. And thank you for sharing about yourself in your stream. Thank you for the raid. Like, wow. Love that they added this as a category. Yeah, it is awesome. So, first time seeing the category. And, additionally, currently, our little writing community, some of us are participating in October, which is a little event that we're doing to collectively be encouraging each other to write and hit word counts if people are looking to like hit a certain number of words in the month or anything like that. But it's pretty chill. It's just like encouraging each other to all write and that stuff. You subscribed. Thank you for the subscription. Wow, thank you. Oh my gosh. So yeah, it's similar event to like NaNoWriMo, King Puyo, you ask, but it's much more chill. NaNoWriMo is like very intense. Shooting for a word count, shooting to like write a book, I think is the kind of goal. And that's personally a lot for me. So I think NaNoWriMo just depends on the person. If you feel like you can buckle down for a month and really focus and work hard to write a book, do it. Absolutely, right? If that sounds intense for you, if that sounds like it's going to be bad for your mental health, physical health, don't do NaNoWriMo, right? But for everyone who wants to learn more, we have a little... So the other October streamers, I have a whole list here, which I can put in chat. These are all the people doing October. And then there's also a spreadsheet that you can go in, and if you write alongside with on someone's stream, right? Let's say my stream, if you were writing right now and co-working, everything's making so many noises on Twitch. Hitting all the goals, subscribers. This is amazing. I've not had this happen, right? Oh my gosh. So go follow them, and then if you write along, if you're like co-working on stream or anything like that, we have a cool little spreadsheet for October where you can add your word counts. And we are collectively, as a writing community, shooting for 1 million words on Twitch, right? Of our communities, of ourselves, the streamers, the writers, all of that, right? And I tend to write very small amounts as a poet, so I like to encourage other people to write on my stream and send stuff in to me. I have also like a link where anyone watching can just submit me writing, and I will try to eventually get around to it, right? And like that's what we do here. We read and we write and we analyze and we learn together, and it's a grand old time. So, that being said, I am going to try to get back to this analysis. Very cool. It is very cool, and I'm glad you think the same. And then all of the things that I analyze are ending up on YouTube. I have a playlist of my VODs called The Poets of Twitch, right? Same as the stream title, and that is where it all lands so that it can be enjoyed on demand, everyone can learn, and all of that. And I will also, I need to give you a shout out. I only had like, admittedly, like 5 viewers before you rated, but for anyone who doesn't know Dechart Games, who's my viewers, go give them a follow. Seems like they're awesome and care about poetry. Awesome, do your thing. You're very generous of spirit. I appreciate that. And yeah, so I'm gonna try to. They are awesome. Seems like it. You all seem pretty cool as a bunch of people and a community, so I'm glad to have you over here on my stream. You're gonna go rest now. Yeah, for anyone joining in, if you've been watching Twitch for a while or streaming on Twitch for a while or writing, make sure to just take a break. Give yourself some self-care. If you need to get away from the screen, rest your eyes. Wow. 10 gifted subs, thank you so much. That means so much. Wow. This is so nice. It reminds me of my literature course. So fun and relaxing, talking and analyzing poems. Yeah, that's what I want it to be. I want to be your unqualified queer Twitch streamer English professor. If I can do that, then that's all I want, right? Teach people poetry, help people learn, help people enjoy the art that I like so much. That's what it's about, right? So yeah. Wow. I'm gonna push back the next ad break for a little while because I don't want to hit you all with an ad immediately as you come in. And we're going to try to get back on track amongst the many notifications of follows and subscriptions, gifted subs. Thank you so much for those. I mean, you gifted 10 subs. I had only gotten 5 subs prior. I hit affiliate on Monday. Like, I don't know. It means so much to me. And more so, it's amazing that you've brought so many people here to watch this and watch me and hopefully enjoy, learn about poetry and the things that I love and want to teach about. Congratulations. Thank you. You got a sub. Congrats on everyone who got a sub. That's super cool. So that, yeah. Thank you all. Well, poetry, shall we? Wow. Oh my gosh. So, we were talking about repetition. And I'm going to read this poem out loud for all of you, just so you can get an idea of what we were reading, what we've heard, what we're talking about. So, this is Last Night by Shooter Daniel, one of my good friends and chatter in chat today. Probably is still around, hopefully. So yeah, Last Night. The darkness beckons forward into more dark. Eyes stare into the void and see the reflection of what is. Pacing around endlessly in the void-filled park, it doesn't matter. After all, there is no hope in this all. A tingle, a connection, a thread stringing out in front. I can see it, the nurturing life waters, brandished in bottle form. A feeling of wrongness. Should I take more or shunt? Worries washed away as the liquid pours down my throat. The darkness beckons forward into more dark. I am alone, no superiors, equals, or inferiors. Sip. I hold the container in my hand to desperately mark. The choir of the damned calls out to me. Sip. A voice, distant and far, years and miles away, reaching through the space to grace me. Sip. How kind. We talk despite the futility today. She ruins my comforts and perceptions. Sip. Why? Oh, how I begged for community and purpose. How cruel they keep running farther and farther away. Sip. The voice tells me to just embrace the absurd. How cool. I know better. I know better. I know better. Sip. The wells of knowledge and happiness are empty, machining. There's nothing left in the bottle, another mirror, wanting to be filled by some greater meaning. Things feel uneasy. The void spins greatly. My insides come pouring out. My ego shrinks against the wall. Tears stream purposelessly. I hate you. I hate you so much. I'm left in a puddle of wallow, crying out into more dark, beckoned. A pain, a grudge, I can never swallow. That is Last Night by Shooter Daniel, as I'm still trying to process the number of people in my Twitch chat and hype trains and what all this stuff means. But we're talking about repetition, because obviously a super important thing in this poem is sip, 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 and repeating darkness and the theme, the metaphor of drinking over and over. Lovely reading, thank you. So, let's see. Can I push the ad back more? Okay. So then we were saying, what I was saying is, with repetition, we have two options. We have either repeated enough, we have repeated too much, or we have repeated not enough, right? And if we decide we want something repeated more, it's a pretty simple thing with repetition. You add more. It's a fairly straightforward tool in our poetic toolkit. Not too much to it, right? So, but first we want to, I guess, look at everything that we are repeating. So, because there are different kinds of things you can repeat in poetry. I can repeat an actual individual word. I can repeat sip, sip, sip every other line for 18 lines or whatever, 12 lines. I can also repeat, a metaphor or an idea. You can use repetition without saying a specific word. You can keep talking about drinking, right? And we do that in this poem as well. We also repeat the idea of a mirror a few times. We only say mirror once or twice, but the idea comes back multiple times. There's an aspect, there's some philosophy, some reference, some philosophical themes in there that are repeated. So we have to ask the question, do we want more of this? Do we want less of this? Do we want none of this? With each of our repetitions. And I want to start with the idea, you might think I would start with sip, because it's maybe the most prominent example of repetition in this poem. I think I am not. And I would rather start with the idea of the mirror, because I really like this in the poem, the idea of the mirror. So There it is once, there it is again. And I think it can clarify a lot of other parts of the poems if we other parts of the poem if we understand the mirror, or at least as I feel like I'm reading it, right? So we use it twice. Reflection of what is, pacing around, doesn't matter. Feeling of wrongness pours down my throat. A mirror is a great metaphor, and a great symbol more so. Because in the mirror we look at ourselves. Reflection. And I'm actually going to include this in the mirror idea. And this poem is very much about the subject's self-contradiction. I want to do something, but I cannot. I want to stop. I cannot stop. I want to put down the bottle. I take another sip. And these are self-referential thoughts, right? It's self-reflective. Reflective, like a mirror. Additionally, a mirror has another great meaning of things being opposite. When you look in the mirror, everything is reflected, everything is backwards, potentially wrong. Backward. That's kind of what the mirror does. Flips things around backwards. Potentially how we don't want them to be. Things in the mirror are opposite. Take more or shunt. Knowing better than doing. That kind of stuff. So, I find the mirror to be very useful in this poem, just because as a symbol, it has very applicable meaning, right? And I feel like it's maybe just a little bit underutilized, because I imagine our narrator staring in the mirror, saying this. I hate you so much. It's a poem about personal failure, not being able to stop drinking. From one's own perspective, I don't consider being subject to an addiction completely a personal failure. I want to make that clear, right? Addiction is something people are impacted by and suffer from, and it's not always the addict's fault that they are an addict. But in that moment, it's pretty easy to hate oneself when you're doing something you know you don't want to do and can't stop. Crying purposelessly because no matter how much I suffer, I'm not going to get myself to stop doing this thing. That's difficult. Also, thank you for the follow. Someone followed, and brain's a little frazzled from the raid. So, in this sense, I really like the mirror. I also think maybe we use the mirror more because of that. And we'll come back to how in the future, because we have a few other symbols and repetitions. So the mirror maybe goes under not enough. Now we have sip. We use sip 6 times. And kind of 7 pours down my throat. The darkness beckons forward into more dark. I'm alone, no superiors, equals, or inferiors. Sip. I hold the container in my hand to desperately mark. The choir of the damned calls out to me. sip. A voice distant, talking about this person. Why? This is a descent, right? Of course, it's a descent into inebriation. It's also a descent away from self-control. I know better, I know better, I know better. Sip. Interestingly, another repetition here. So the question is, do we want more? Do we want less? That's the question with repetition. And I feel like at the beginning, we have some amount of control here. We're not as inebriated. I am alone, no superiors, equals, or inferiors. That's not necessarily a negative statement. It's other than being alone, but it's me in the bottle. But then a voice comes in. You have this person talking to you, maybe a person in your life, a memory, etc. Ruining your comforts and perceptions, losing control, not having perception. So maybe this is the drink as well. Why, oh how I begged for community and purpose, how cruel, they keep running farther away, the voice tells me embrace the absurd, I know better, right? This is going full on into a lack of control. The voice is talking to you, I know better, I do it anyway. So the question is, this is showing like a gradient and easing into things. And that could go faster if we have less repetitions. Could also go slower. If we add more repetitions, it's going to take longer to get to the climax, which is also going to make it more dramatic. And that's the thing with the our little repetition graph. Each time we add a repetition, if they're going somewhere, we're going to add drama, impact. If we go too far, though, it's just going to get a little dull and tired before we have our climactic moment, and it could even get less dramatic. I personally feel like there can be more of this, and maybe it's also just that I take small sips, but I don't think I could finish a bottle in 6 sips. Not to be too literal with the analysis, but obviously if you had like 40 sips, that doesn't make sense because it's probably too much, and like you only have 1 bottle. But it doesn't seem out of place to me to add another like thing of sips, or another stanza with 2 more sips. Because we go from talking about this girl, she ruins my comfort and perceptions, or this feminine entity, reaching out, being kind, talking, and then she ruins things. Why, oh how I begged for community and purpose, how cruel, they keep running farther and farther away. This feels a little bit like jarring as a change. We talk about her, we just start talking about she, and then we go talk about something else. Of course, she is also the voice, but so then we have to talk about transition. Maybe, we're trying to keep an eye on the ad break. Try to get this in. Voice tells me to just embrace how absurd, how cool, right? The issue to me with these 2 stanzas is that why, oh how I begged for community and purpose, how cruel, doesn't feel like it directly connects to she ruins my comforts and perceptions. But if you had something at the start of this stanza that does directly connect, the voice tells me to embrace the absurd, how cool, some other line, how I begged for community and purpose, how cruel, they keep running away, sip, adding more lines. I personally think that would make that transition a little cleaner and give you more space to add more sips and more ramping up, right? So, in my opinion, maybe we also don't repeat sip enough. And you might be seeing a theme that I think we can repeat more. That's why I've decided to talk about repetition, because I think the repetitions in this poem are very powerful. And I think because of that, you can lean into them more. My biggest advice that I end up giving on stream all the time is, I like this, and then do more of the thing I like, or the thing that works. Obviously, what I like isn't necessarily the only thing that might be good about the poem. But if there's something that works really well, feels like it works really well, well, why not just lean into it until you can't anymore? Obviously, you need to know the line, and part of that is having someone to show you that you can push a little further toward the line. But I think more repetition there would be fun. Going to an ad break. So please stand up. Don't watch the ad. No one here should be watching the ad. You should be standing up, drinking water, having a snack, doing something to care for yourself. Go to the bathroom. Don't watch the ad. Don't let the corporations monetize your viewership. Just look somewhere else. Care for yourself. Ads are a way to rot your brain. So don't watch it. I'm standing up, drinking water, stretching. That's what I do. Yeah. Welcome back. I am still Ginny, and I'm still known as 2/3 Lotus everywhere on the internet. And we are going to get back to this poem, known as Last Night by Shooter Daniel. So, we're talking about repetition, and we've talked about the sips and the idea of the mirror. And right now I'm considering anything in the poem that happens more than once pretty much to be repetition. So another repetition, you have I know better, I know better, I know better sip. And I really enjoy this line. Right. It perfectly encapsulates the moment of doing something you don't want to, I think. I need to switch the camera. I'm sorry, y'all. I know better, I know better, I know better, sip. Is so powerful. having this thing that you feel compelled to do, you know better, you're not going to do it, you indulge. It's always how it is. It's that lead up to the moment, and then you do it, right? And I think you could, if you want to, utilize this more throughout. I mean, I wonder, right, if I know better, should be the first one up here. Or this one. Because at this point, we're this far in, and you're already losing control. The voice is talking to you, controlling you, cruelty, you have no purpose, they're running further and further away, right? And it makes me wonder, why is SIP number 6 more important than the others? Because, and maybe it is the point of, it's like the tipping point that leads to this, right? But with our graph that we talked about, at least in my opinion, maybe others disagree, the first one of the repetition, or maybe the second one, are gonna be your most important. Because they're also gonna establish, these are establishing. So the context around them and the meaning and the things that you use them to talk about kind of gets reflected throughout the rest of the repetitions, the graph. And if you said at the start, I know better, SIP, that's going to imply for every future SIP, I know better and I shouldn't be doing this, right? Which is the sensation of indulging. I know better, I do it. I know better, I do it again. I still know better, and you keep doing it. Granted, you could also keep the last one, add something like I know better up here, and then when you get back and say I know better again, repetition, adding that weight, adding that impact, adding that callback. Because addiction and giving in to that sort of indulgence is cyclical, it's repetitive. So it only makes sense to use your repetition as much as you can. It feels appropriate for the theme. And we talk about lots of tools on this channel, repetition being one. Past one, efficiency being another idea. The specificity graph that we draw on like every other poem, this is important too. And some, let's say this one, this was a super metaphorical poem that was much more abstract. Abstraction is a tool. And certain tools work better with certain themes. Notably, if that tool reflects what's actually happening in the theme. So, addiction, alcoholism. If that is an action of repetition and indulgence, or failure, indulgence, trying to keep yourself from doing it, failure, indulgence, trying to keep yourself from doing it, failure, indulgence, repetition is what expresses that so well. And a lot of this poem is doing things other than the repetitions. And I think I guess the most important part of the poem to me, the part that quote-unquote steals the show, is the middle section. Which is good, you want the middle of your poem to be impactful. But it just makes me wonder if you can use more repetitions throughout. And I think that's maybe where we use something like the mirror. We have a really dense section of repeating sip, and I don't think you would want to try to keep doing sip before or after because it literally doesn't work with the story. But that's where you can have a second thing, perhaps the mirror, that gets used more repetitively throughout to call back to the idea of cyclical indulgence. So if we had mirror, mirror, maybe mentioned in every stanza, it would give a stronger through line, a stronger feeling of repetition really being kind of the point of the poem. So that's just an idea, right? Shooter Daniel, I presume you're still here. Do you have any questions? Because I know the analysis got very kind of disorganized, and if anyone feels like it has been, I'm sorry. Again, giant influx of viewers threw me off. So, or if anyone else has other questions about the poem or things I can talk about or clarification if things weren't unclear, I would be super stoked to provide that, because that's why I'm here, to help you all understand more about poetry. So, if not, then I will do one more read, because I think it's super important. I am have none, but also must go. Surprisingly enough, this review made me want to go take care of myself for a bit. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Shooter Daniel, for sharing. It means the world that you share a poem this vulnerable, something that is deeply important. It's a very hard thing to write about and a harder thing to share with others. So, thank you. And that being said, I'm going to read it again, one final time, because you should read it at the start to enjoy the poem and appreciate it. And I think you should also be reading the poem at the end, because you've gone through all this analysis, all this heady stuff, and sometimes we can forget to just enjoy the poem. So that's what I like to do at the end. You've got a really nice calming voice. That's all I have to say. Thank you. That means a lot. It means a ton. As a trans person and all of that. So, Last Night by Shooter Daniel. The darkness beckons forward into more dark. Eyes stare into the void and see the reflection of what is pacing around endlessly in the void-filled park. It doesn't matter. After all, there is no hope in this all. A tingle, a connection, a thread stringing out in front. I can see it, the nurturing life waters brandished in bottle form. A feeling of wrongness. Should I take more or shunt? Worries washed away as the liquid pours down my throat. The darkness beckons forward into more dark. I am alone, no superiors, equals, or inferiors. Sip. I hold the container in my hand to desperately mark. The choir of the damned calls out to me. Sip. A voice distant and far, years and miles away, reaching through the space to grace me. Sip. How kind we talk despite the futility today. She ruins my comforts and perceptions. Sip. Why? Oh, how I begged for community and purpose. How cruel they keep running farther and farther away. Sip, I know better. The voice tells me to just embrace the absurd. How cool. I know better. I know better. I know better. Sip. The wells of knowledge and happiness are empty. Machining. There's nothing left in the bottle. Another mirror. Wanting to be filled by some greater meaning. Things feel uneasy, the void spins greatly, my insides come pouring out. My ego shrinks against the wall, tears stream purposelessly. I hate you so much. I'm left in a puddle of wallow, crying out into more dark beckon, a pain, a grudge I can never swallow. Last Night by Shooter Daniel. Hello, Drowning Devil 12. How are you doing on this fine, whatever time zone you're in? Damn? Referring to the poem? Yeah, it's heavy. And thank you all for sticking around for that analysis, and I'm probably going to do something else still. Keep streaming. Thank you for watching. I encourage you to check out the rest of the series, follow if you enjoyed, and stop by Twitch if you want to share your own work. See you there.